Before the lights came on and before anyone knew his name, a barefoot boy from the forgotten slums of the Philippines stood behind the biggest stage in America, holding a cracked guitar and a secret that would soon break a nation's heart. If you believe dreams don't come from places like this, stay with me, because what happened next made even Simon Cowell cry. And before we begin, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because stories like this deserve to be heard. The boy's name was Mateo Cruz, and for most of his life, the world had treated him as if he were invisible. He grew up in a crowded slum on the outskirts of Manila, where houses were built from rusted tin, broken wood, and whatever scraps people could find. When it rained, the streets flooded so badly that children waded through dirty water just to get home. When it was hot, the sun burned through the metal roofs, turning their tiny homes into ovens. Mateo's family of 5 lived in a single room that barely fit a mattress, a small table, and a stove that worked only when they could afford gas. His father, Ramon, was a construction helper who found work only a few days a week. His mother, Liza, washed clothes for wealthier families, scrubbing until her hands cracked and bled. Mateo was the second of 3 children, quiet, thin, and always watching the world with eyes that seemed far older than his age. Music was not supposed to be part of Mateo's life. Survival was. Every morning before school, he helped his father collect scrap metal and plastic bottles to sell. Some days, that money was the only reason they ate. Mateo learned early how hunger felt, how it made your stomach burn and your head spin, and how you learned to ignore it if you wanted to keep moving. School was something he loved, but even there, he was reminded of his place. His uniform was faded, his shoes were often broken, and sometimes he skipped class because he had no fare for the jeepney. Still, he went whenever he could, sitting in the back, listening, dreaming quietly. The guitar entered his life by accident. One evening, while scavenging near a closed bar, Mateo found an old guitar thrown in the trash. One string was missing, the body was cracked, and it looked useless. But to Mateo, it was treasure. He carried it home like it was something alive. His father tried to fix it using wire from an old electric fan, and somehow, it made sound. The first time Mateo strummed it, the sound was rough and uneven, but something inside him woke up. He didn't know chords or notes. He only knew how the vibrations felt in his chest, how the sound made the noise of the slum fade away. Mateo taught himself to play by listening. He stood outside neighbors' windows when radios played, memorizing melodies. He watched street musicians and copied their fingers. At night, after his siblings slept, he played quietly, afraid to disturb them. Music became his escape, his way of imagining a life beyond the narrow alleys and constant fear of hunger. But there was a twist even Mateo didn't understand yet. His voice, when he finally dared to sing, was not like other children's voices. It was deep, emotional, and carried a pain that stunned anyone who heard it. His mother was the first to notice. One night, she heard him singing softly, and she stopped washing clothes just to listen. Tears rolled down her face as she realized her son was pouring everything he couldn't say into his voice. She told him he was special. Mateo didn't believe her. In the slum, everyone had dreams, and most of them died quietly. Still, she encouraged him to sing whenever he could. A year later, tragedy struck. Mateo's father fell from a construction site and injured his back badly. He could no longer work heavy jobs. The little income they had almost disappeared overnight. Mateo started skipping school to help more, selling snacks, cleaning car windows, and sometimes singing on the streets for spare change. People stopped, not because he was a child, but because his voice made them stop. Some cried, some prayed, some just stared, but coins were still few, and hunger remained. One day, a volunteer from a local charity heard Mateo sing and recorded him on a phone. That short video spread through social media in the Philippines. It reached a teacher, then a producer, and eventually someone connected to an international talent show. When Mateo's family received the call inviting him to audition in America, they thought it was a joke. They had no passports, no money, and no idea how a boy like Mateo could belong on a stage like that. Here came the next twist. The charity stepped in, arranging documents and flights. For the first time in his life, Mateo was on an airplane. He pressed his face against the window, watching clouds pass, wondering if he was dreaming. His mother cried quietly the whole flight, terrified and proud at the same time. Mateo carried his old guitar with him, refusing to leave it behind. Backstage at the audition, Mateo felt smaller than ever. The building was enormous. The lights were blinding. Contestants around him wore expensive clothes and talked confidently. He wore a simple shirt and borrowed shoes. A producer asked about his story, and Mateo answered honestly, without drama. He didn't know how to pretend. When they asked him what song he would sing, he said it was a song he wrote himself, about his father and the nights he went to sleep hungry. When Mateo stepped onto the stage, the audience barely noticed him at first. He looked too young, too thin, too ordinary. Simon Cowell leaned back in his chair, expression unreadable. The judges asked his name and where he was from. Mateo answered softly, his accent thick but his words clear. Then he began to play. The first notes were simple. Then he sang. Within seconds, the room changed. His voice carried raw emotion, not polished, not trained, but painfully real. He sang about rain leaking through the roof, about his mother's tired hands, about dreaming of a future he couldn't see. The audience grew silent. One judge covered her mouth. Simon Cowell leaned forward, eyes fixed on the boy. Midway through the song, Mateo's voice cracked. He stopped playing. The silence was unbearable. He whispered an apology. That's when Simon Cowell did something no one expected. He told Mateo to take a breath and start again. Mateo closed his eyes and continued. This time, his voice was stronger, filled with determination. By the final note, many in the audience were crying openly. When the song ended, there was a pause, then a standing ovation. Simon Cowell wiped his eyes. He admitted he hadn't expected that kind of honesty, that kind of pain, from a child. He said Mateo reminded him why music mattered. Then came another twist. Instead of immediate praise, Simon asked Mateo what he wanted more than anything. Mateo answered, simply, that he wanted his family to eat every day and his father to stop feeling like a burden. Simon stood up and walked to the stage. He pressed the golden buzzer. Golden confetti rained down as Mateo fell to his knees, overwhelmed. His mother ran from backstage, hugging him as the crowd roared. In that moment, a boy from the slums became a symbol of hope. But the story didn't end there. Fame came fast, and with it, pressure. Online critics questioned his authenticity. Others accused the show of exploiting his poverty. Mateo struggled, overwhelmed by attention, missing home, missing the quiet nights with his broken guitar. Before the live shows, he almost quit. He told producers he didn't think he belonged. That's when Simon visited him privately and told him that belonging wasn't about where you came from, but about what you gave the world. Mateo returned to the stage stronger. Each performance told another chapter of his life. America watched, week after week, falling in love with a boy who sang like he carried 1,000 stories in his chest. Win or lose, he had already changed his family's life. His father received medical care. His siblings returned to school. Their home in the slum was repaired, not replaced, because Mateo insisted they remember where they came from. In the finale, Mateo didn't win first place. Another contestant took the title. For a moment, the crowd gasped, expecting heartbreak. But Mateo smiled. He bowed deeply, tears in his eyes, and thanked the audience. Later that night, Simon announced he was signing Mateo to a music deal, saying the world needed his voice more than any trophy could show. Today, Mateo Cruz is no longer invisible. He sings on stages across the world, but he still plays that old guitar, now restored, as a reminder of nights when hope was all he had. His story is not just about talent. It is about resilience, about how pain can become music, and how a boy from the slums can make a nation cry.